Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Burnaby North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And I do acknowledge that I'm here as their uninvited guest. It had not been my intention to rise to speak to Bill 10. It's, after all, an interim supply bill meant to provide bridge funding between the end of the fiscal year on March 31st and the passage of a new budget about a month from now. I wasn't going to speak because I thought it was a no-brainer and that it would pass quickly. I didn't think Bill 10 needed defending. And then I started listening to the high drama unfolding during debate, and I realized it did need defending. We've been living in unprecedented times. It's been a year since the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. Who knew a year ago what that even meant in real terms? Who knew a year ago how it would change our lives, our daily practices, our customs, yes, even our legislative timelines? It's even affected the way we govern ourselves. So many things have been slowed down, been put on hold, resources redirected. While we took stock, asked ourselves, what is safe to do? What is no longer safe to do? Our answers to these questions have been evolving as we learned more about the virus itself, how it's transmitted, how we behave collectively and as individuals, and in the face of this crisis, how we protect ourselves and each other. Who would have imagined a year ago that I would be speaking to the chamber by Zoom? I'm not sure a year ago I really even knew what Zoom was. And now I find out that not only am I an MLA, but today I'm a Zoom LA. Thank goodness we in British Columbia have such an experienced, calm, compassionate public health officer to lead us through this crisis. Thank you, Dr. Bonnie Henry. And thank goodness we have a premier and a minister of health who had the humility and integrity to let a medical expert lead us and let medical science, not politics, shape our response. And in light of the aspersions that have been cast on their characters during this debate, I want to make a special point of thanking the Premier and the Minister of Health for being such positive and dignified role models. Not all jurisdictions have been as fortunate as British Columbia, and that cost lives and livelihoods unnecessarily. But British Columbia is not an island unto ourselves, and in spite of our efforts, our excellent leadership, and social solidarity here, too many lives have been lost, either directly from COVID or indirectly due to the disruptions that led to skyrocketing overdose deaths. We mourn their loss, and our hearts go out to their loved ones. The pandemic disrupted life as we know it, life as we expect it, and that includes the presentation of the 2021 provincial budget. Hence today, we find ourselves here debating an interim supply bill. Why? Because the pandemic not only disrupted lives, it disrupted the business of this House, and the 2021 budget was delayed. So the Minister of Finance is asking for bridging funds so we can continue to pay the people that keep our schools open, to pay the people that provide health care, childcare workers, and so we can continue to build more childcare centers, more hospitals, new schools, so that we can fund homeless shelters, and so we can fund second and third stage housing for women and their children fleeing violent relationships. Continue to open more urgent and primary care networks, reduce wait times for surgeries and life-saving tests. Blank check? I don't think so. And in spite of the repeated claims to the contrary, the opposition speakers know exactly that these are the kinds of critical, community nourishing expenses that the interim supply bill will fund. And yet they dismissively call it an NDP piggy bank. The government is doing good work for the people of British Columbia, work that is too important to be disrupted. The interim supply bill should have been a no-brainer, and yet here we are still debating it. And I'm puzzled by the high drama being played out by opposition members. And as this debate has gone on and on, I am becoming ever more shocked and disappointed to hear members opposite use this debate as an opportunity to try to undermine social unity and try to plant seeds of distrust in the government, to try to drive a wedge between the government and the people we are working so hard to protect today and into the future. So yes, I do feel compelled during a pandemic that isn't over yet, during a time when we need to trust each other and depend on each other as British Columbians to survive this pandemic, both in body and economically, yes, I feel compelled to rise and respond to the smear campaign being launched from across the aisle. I feel compelled to set the record straight. When I was a newly minted MLA, an experienced opposition member volunteered the information that what was said in the chamber was all theater. She advised me not to take it seriously. Well, I rejected that advice. I do take it seriously. This is not theater. It's real life. And real people in our communities can become collateral damage of overheated rhetoric. I listened to the debate on Tuesday. I think I heard every single speaker from the opposition benches toss in the phrase fudget budget at least once. And again, I heard it this afternoon. Well, what does that even mean? It's clearly code. It's clearly supposed to trigger some vague impression of government corruption and deceit. It's clearly meant to make our government look bad and call our integrity into question. It's clearly meant to undermine trust in the government that is leading us out of this pandemic. Few British Columbians will know or remember what fudget budget means. They just know it's bad. So I decided to look it up to remind myself, and I am so glad I did. Here is the first thing that came up was this. And this is a newspaper article from July 12th, 2020. And I'll just read the first couple of sentences. It starts, released on Thursday, BC's public accounts for the fiscal year 2009-2010 conclusively prove that the pre-election fiscal plan foisted on British Columbians by Premier Gordon Campbell and his BC Liberals on February 17th, 2009 was the worst, the most egregious, the most deceptive budget in provincial history. The public accounts show that Campbell Liberals inflated revenues in Victoria's main operating account, the Consolidated Revenue Fund, by a stunning $2.558 billion. And I'm still quoting, yes, billion, with taxation receipts alone overstated by 2,000.1 billion. Even under the broader GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles presentation, the Campbell government exaggerated last year's expected revenues by a whopping 1.3 billion. The result, a gargantuan shortfall of 1.779 billion for fiscal 2009-2010, nearly 4 times higher than Campbell's oft-repeated pre-election pledge of a deficit no bigger than $495 million. Billions. We are talking billions. Now compare that with the so-called budget that they want to invoke. Compare that with the $703 million that the Glenn Clark government was accused of miscalculating. It pales by comparison. Now, the members opposite may be regretting that they read out their talking points with such gusto. Maybe they should have checked their facts first. Maybe the next speaker might want to think twice before they remind the public about budgets and government piggy banks. Glass houses, Mr. Speaker. During the debate on Bill 10, the BC Liberals have been engaging in the worst form of dog whistle politics, and it feels like deja vu. They are trying to rewrite history and paint a distorted picture of the present. Why? Because it worked for them before. What won't they do or say to get back into power? They are past masters at tricking people into voting against their own best interests. So I want to add my voice to the voices of my colleagues who have been rising one after another to answer the distortions, distractions, and disinformation perpetuated by speakers from the official opposition. Now, here are some truths I want the people of my community of Burnaby North to remember. So let's look at our job numbers. 1 year into this pandemic, British Columbia has returned to 99.4% of pre-pandemic employment levels. BC's economy remains one of the strongest in Canada, having created jobs in each of the past 10 months. The Labour Force Survey for February shows BC added 26,600 jobs, with the majority of those jobs going to women. This dropped BC's unemployment rate to 6.9% from 8% in January, the month before. And employment in parts of the province is above pre-pandemic levels. In Prince George, it's at 106.7%. In Kamloops, it's at 103.3%. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that not all sectors are back to full strength. We know they continue to need our support to thrive. And we know that childcare plays a huge role. According to the Conference Board of Canada, for every dollar that we spend on childcare, $6 are returned to the economy. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our government has invested more than $320 million to support 4,500 childcare centers. Close to $600 million has gone back to parents in reduced fees and benefits, and more than 36,000 children are receiving $10 a day childcare. More than 13,000 early childhood educators are receiving wage enhancement. And that's in Burnaby alone. In Burnaby alone, our government has invested almost $24 million in childcare. More than $7 million has been returned to the pockets of parents, $7 million that they can spend in their communities and help keep struggling businesses open. 41 local early childhood educators have received almost $300 million in wage enhancement. And affordable housing is something that matters to my community as well. I live in a community that wants everyone to have a roof over their heads and a door that locks. And we have already built 52 units of supportive housing, and another 43 are on the way, as well as 45 new shelter spaces. construction has started on a brand new Burnaby North secondary school. And it will make a big difference when it is built and operational. Once complete, it will provide students with a modern facility designed for the 21st century, learning for generations to come. The replacement will also feature a new neighborhood learning center that will offer adult basic education, as well as a standalone childcare center funded through the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund and the City of Burnaby. Together, these facilities will create more than 120 new licensed childcare spaces, including before and after school care. Members opposite keep complaining that they don't know how we will spend the funds we're requesting in the interim supply bill. Well, I think they do. And I think the complaints are all part of their theater. But if they don't remember, if it doesn't come to mind, I hope that these examples will help refresh their memories. In the course of debate over the last few days, I've heard members opposite say that government needs to get out of the way. Well, Mr. Speaker, I find those chilling words. And that's more dog whistle politics. It's code for let the market do our thinking. It's code for survival of the fittest. That was a statement first coined by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan about 50 years ago, and repeated more recently by the likes of Donald Trump. It is code for an ideology that has crippled public services, destroyed lives, and turned thriving communities into ghost towns all around the world. And there is a direct line between that statement, first made 50 years ago, and the storming of the US Capitol on January 6th. I would urge opposition debaters to be careful about what they may be unleashing with their overheated, repeated rhetoric. The people of British Columbia soundly rejected that kind of thinking in the last provincial election. They chose a government that will act proactively to make life better for even the most marginalized and vulnerable. Yet I heard opposition members state earlier in this debate that the BC NDP bought the election. That is dangerous and hateful words. And it insults the intelligence and the integrity of voters. The people of British Columbia freely chose a government that will say yes to the following kinds of questions. Does everyone have the right to a job that pays a living wage? Yes. Does everyone have the right to quality health care and social supports when they need it? Yes. Does everyone have the right to a complete education? Yes. Does everyone have the right to affordable housing? Yes. Does everyone have the right to a clean environment? Yes. Does everyone have the right to a secure retirement? Yes. Those are the principles that my government stands for. And we know that we are far from realizing them all, but we are working hard to get there. Some would say we aren't moving fast enough. Well, anyone watching this debate will appreciate what one of our biggest obstacles have been. The interim supply bill is part of keeping up the momentum in the right direction. Those are the principles we stand for. And after listening to the smear campaign and vicious hysteria that made up the BC Liberal debate points, one wonders what they stand for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.